Welcome to the Hours of Service Driver Accountability Training Module, the second in the series on this important HSE topic and another critical piece of your development within the Pepsi Beverages New Bern organization. So over the next 10 to 15 minutes, we're going to cover the following content areas: EHOS navigation, login screen and certification, 30-minute break entry, and Kronos end-of-day screen. Grid log, DOT regulations that determine if completing a grid log is required, grid log assist tool, and how to use it. Required records, how to grid log 30-minute breaks and quality matters, form and manner violations. HSE resource library, important documentation that relates to the info you'll learn about in this module. So that's a high-level look at what will be covered. This module is all about the information a driver receives and how the driver should manage their hours of service utilizing the e-hours of service system. It is business critical that drivers comply with hours of service regulations, and effective leadership will ensure compliance. Drivers will be held accountable for hours of service regulations, taking a 30-minute break without completing any type of work, grid logs that are accurate and up to date. Managers must have a very clear understanding of driver accountability. Drivers failing to comply and are involved in accidents can be subject to criminal charges. Additionally, drivers are protected from being coerced into violating DOT regulations. It's part of PepsiCo's Code of Conduct as well as federal laws regarding reports of violations. So clearly, you can see why this information is so important. Now let's get into the what and the how. Time to dig deeper, and we'll start with the e-hours of service system and what a driver will see first. When they log into the handheld computer, the driver is asked to certify several key statements or questions. Drivers must certify each item before they can move on. The first line to be verified is the LAN ID being used. LAN IDs are unique to each employee, and it's a violation of company security policy for employees to be sharing LAN IDs. Drivers must also certify that they've had 10 hours off since their last shift. This was referenced in the previous module, Hours of Service Overview. Next, the driver verifies he or she has available hours to work today. This statement means they are the driver operating the vehicle. Now, sometimes we have drivers sitting in the passenger seat and operating the handheld. The moment they activate and answer these questions, the system puts them into a driving position and assumes they're operating a commercial motor vehicle. Now, this calculates on-duty time and may become a violation and something the manager will need to address while monitoring the portal. The final step is certifying that the driver has completed all required grid logs from the previous day. As covered in the Hours of Service Overview module, any driver that works more than 12 hours a day or operates outside the 100 air mile radius is required to complete a paper grid log. So each day they are certifying that they've turned in the log for the prior day if they were required to log. It's important that drivers certify this information, and it must be truthful and accurate. And if it isn't, there has to be corrective action. If for any reason the driver cannot or does not check off one of these statements, they will be unable to move forward and should see their supervisor. Drivers cannot be dispatched if they do not meet the requirements. Now, we'll discuss how the 30-minute break works into all of this. Drivers must enter all 30-minute breaks or lunch into the handheld, and this is done by selecting the lunch option in the toolkit. Changes in the handheld in late 2015 now lock the handheld from all activity during the 30-minute break. DOT requires a 30-minute rest within every 8 consecutive hours. So if the driver takes a break too early, it may require them to take another break 8 hours later. In other words, a driver dispatched for 12 hours and takes a break 2 hours into the shift will be required to take a second break before the 11th hour. Keep in mind that breaks entered into Kronos do not feed into e-hours of service, so Kronos punches won't be recognized in the EHOS and will result in break violations. Break violations include failure to enter lunch or break in the handheld. Break is not 30 minutes or more. Or on duty more than 12 hours with no break. Now we'll get into how all of this works in a moment. But first, a safety checkpoint. First up, when logging into a handheld computer, the driver must. The answer is D, all of the above. True or false? Drivers do not need to verify they have submitted all grid logs. The answer is false. How often does the DOT require a 30-minute rest? The answer is A, within every 8 consecutive hours of on duty. Finally, true or false? Breaks entered into Kronos feed into the EHOS. The answer is false. We are now at the Kronos end of day screen. The driver has gone through their day and they've done everything they need to do. They've serviced their customers, took their 30-minute break, gone through the gate check-in, and completed their post-trip inspection. Before ending their day, the handheld will prompt the driver to estimate the end of duty time. This time should reflect when the driver expects to clock out and go home. To change the end of duty clock out time, first, click in the time box noted in red on your screen. Next, click on the minus or plus to change the time in 1-minute increments. Or to rapidly change the time, click once on the minus or plus sign and then hold down the enter key on the handheld keypad. The handheld will calculate the total on-duty time from the Kronos clock in time to the estimated clock out time that the driver has input, noted in orange on your screen. A driver with an estimated time of more than 12 hours will be required to grid log. The handheld also estimates the driver's start time for the next day to ensure they have the required 10 hours off between shifts. The driver is not done yet. Let's go over when a grid log is required under DOT regulations. EHOS will calculate based on the following 3 rules. Failure to punch. Inability to verify time worked will result in a violation and mandate the driver grid for the day. Exceeding 100 air mile radius. This is driven by the customer master files. Exceeding 12-hour limit. If a grid log is necessary, this screen will be seen with one of the reasons checked in green. Drivers should complete grid logs before clocking out for the day. They will be unable to certify the next day if a grid log is not completed. The driver won't see this screen if a grid log isn't necessary. Now, let's discuss the Grid Log Assist tool. This was added to the Express handheld in late 2015. This tool was put into place because there were instances of drivers estimating and not completing accurate grid logs. It was built on the back end that helps provide the details for drivers as to when they're actually driving versus servicing a customer. Keep in mind, the Grid Log Assist tool is not a grid log. It is a resource to assist the driver to accurately complete the paper grid log when on duty for more than 12 hours. Drivers can view the Grid Log Assist from either the handheld screen or by printing. It's important that drivers print the grid log prior to cradling the handheld, as the data is no longer available once T-comped. You will find the Grid Log Assist guidance tool on the HSE Resource Library. Next, we'll cover records for drivers required by the DOT. A grid log must be completed as soon as a driver realizes they will exceed 12 hours on duty. For drivers dispatched greater than 12 hours, this means prior to leaving the gate. Drivers not in EHOS or managers operating a commercial motor vehicle are required to complete a simple grid log. They need to back up the prior 7 days, and this is done utilizing the simple grid log. Drivers or managers not on EHOS exceeding 12 hours or 100 air mile radius must also complete a grid log and attach it to the simple grid log form, and check the box indicating a grid log was required. This also applies to our MEM team, not currently on E-hours of service, or managers that need to operate a commercial motor vehicle, which lead us to our next segment. To continue on the crucial nature of these topics, the significance of adhering to safety rules and regulations to the individual, the manager, and the general public, we want to stress the responsibility we all have to ask questions and raise concerns whenever compliance issues arise. You should report all violations of our values, our code of conduct, our policies, and of course the law to your manager or supervisor. You can also contact Global Compliance and Ethics or the Law Department. We've also provided a completely confidential way of reporting using Speak Up. There can be no retaliation or negative impact of any kind for reporting these types of concerns. Bottom line, something's up, speak up. So now, let's discuss the HSE Resource Library. Here's where you can find a recap of all the rules and regulations for hours of service. The key documents available include the Grid Log Assist tool and Simple Grid Log. Make sure to check out these helpful tools. You're almost to the finish line. Now for the final safety checkpoint to see how much you've retained from the module. First question, true or false? There are no issues if a manager requires a driver to work outside their available hours. The answer is false. Coercing drivers into violating DOT hours of service regulations is a violation of federal laws and PepsiCo's Code of Conduct. Next question. Drivers must enter all 30-minute breaks into the handheld computer by. The answer is C, selecting the lunch option in the handheld toolkit. Entering the estimated end-of-duty clock-out time will. The answer is C, both A and B. Drivers are required to grid log for the following situations. The answer is D, all of the above. Finally, true or false? Drivers can print the Grid Log Assist tool after cradling the handheld. The answer is false. Drivers must print the Grid Log Assist before TCOM. So that will do it for this module on hours of service, driver accountability. Before closing things out, some key takeaways to remember. It is business critical that drivers comply with hours of service regulations. Drivers are accountable for the following: compliance with all hours of service regulations, not working during the 30-minute break, ensuring grid logs are up to date and submitted daily. Once again, we're counting on you to understand these important principles and lead your people effectively. We know you won't let us down. So, stay tuned for more DOT modules here on Training on Demand. And until next time, thank you for your attention. Stay safe and in the zero zone.